At the age of 21, my chronic depression and my recurrent existentialism was pushing me to do something drastic. It seemed that I had two options before me. I could either end it all now with one of the readily available bottles of vodka and an obnoxious number of pills, or I could try and finally do something worthwhile with my life. I was working in a shithole of a bar with a relentless bully for a manager. My degree in international politics hung uselessly on my bedroom wall, taunting me as I pulled on my uniform every morning. A painful reminder of the wasted 3 years studying and partying in London. My depleted serotonin levels numbed me to the support of my boyfriend, who lived across the county, but it couldn't suppress the hatred that coursed through my veins every time I came home to my abusive mother. I took to barricading myself in my bedroom as I had done as a teenager, a feeble attempt to block out reality and create a safe sphere in which I could self-loathe in peace. At this point, simply killing myself seemed appealing, and also the easiest escape route. However, it was also rather bleak, and seeing as my life had come to nothing so far, I didn't want to just end it miserably. Nothing really says failure quite like just pulling the plug completely. As a last-ditch attempt to find some purpose in this world, I decided to volunteer for the local fire department. If you're not from the UK, then you might not have heard, but over the past couple of years, our government has been, as some would put it, quite shit. What this has meant for the emergency services is that with limited funds, they are forced to run on practically a skeleton crew, and have become dependent on volunteer forces to conduct community calls, leaving the professionals to deal with the tower blazes and car crashes, while individuals like myself do your house calls and save cats from trees, etc. I thought this would mean I'd be doing something kind of wholesome, family-friendly work, rather than the movie-worthy, trauma-inducing horrors that get splashed all over TV screens and newspaper headlines. Didn't realise that sometimes the most horrific cases were the ones that you didn't hear about. The cases that were littered throughout each village and town, overlooked by their neighbours and ignored by their families, like a putrid stain in a piss-soaked stairwell. I had only been volunteering with the service for a few weeks before I came across the first case that shook me. So far, I had only encountered a few hoarders and one kindly but completely blind old lady who needed help fitting a new alarm. As my partner Jonathan knocked on the door, I clumsily flicked through the paperwork we had been provided with from the station, including the request from the NHS to conduct the routine check inspection. The garden was unkempt, and then all the curtains were closed, but on this type of estate that wasn't unusual. Pulling up into the street, we had had death threats thrown at us from a bunch of primary school children, nearly driving over their football as it had rolled into the road. Further along, 2 men exchanging small packages had bolted when they had seen the van, not distinguishing fire and rescue from police. Fumbling, my pen fell to the ground, and as I stooped to pick it up, the front door sharply opened. I was met with a pair of filthy, bare feet, toenails blackened and gnarled, attached to painfully engorged ankles that were threaded with varicose veins. I sharply drew myself backwards as a stench hit my face, rancid to the point of a foul sweetness. A small part of me briefly acknowledged the calmness Jonathan, an ex-paramedic, maintained at my side, as I struggled to compose myself in front of the figure that was stooped in the darkened doorway. She could have been anywhere between the age of 50 and 80. Her patchy, matted hair hung loosely over glazed eyes, and from her loose, toothless jaw, ropey tendrils of discoloured saliva swung. A soiled nightgown covered her crooked frame, but failed to extend past her knees, which exposed legs covered in grime. A sickly warmth radiated from the doorway, and I felt my stomach turn. She didn't even blink, as Jonathan gently explained who we were and why we were there, but after a few moments shuffled away from the door, allowing us room to squeeze into the squalor. I gingerly followed my partner, thankful for my tough, heavy-duty uniform boots, as the carpet squelched beneath my feet. The warmth was stifling, and the smell caught in the back of my throat as I entered the decrepit hallway, picking over the piles of rubbish and waste that seemed to cover every spare bit of floor. The occupants stood eerily silent in the cluttered hallway, staring emptily at our own staircase. Despite the fetid heat, I felt a slight shiver of familiarity run through me. Whilst I was at university, one of my housemates had developed a nasty habit for Valium, and any other pill that his dealer could convince him was Valium. I'd found gaping and blue more than a few times in his own bedroom doorway, drooling and glassy, just like this absent woman. I'm not proud to say that I retched audibly as I inhaled the thick, putrid air of the first room, and it coated my tongue in the same fashion as cheap red wine, clinging to the roof of my mouth. The furniture was heavily soiled with human waste, illuminated only by the buzzing light of the ancient television which displayed a jangling daytime show. It seemed apparent that we weren't just going to have to check for overloaded plug sockets in this place. As we swiftly backed out of the room, a slow horror began to seep through me as I scanned the stained walls, smeared with muddy scuffs and handprints, suddenly realizing their origin. I felt the colour drain from my face, and turned to Jonathan as my stomach turned in revulsion. He took one look at my face and told me to go fetch the ladder from the van. It was a code we had for "get yourself out of here." I was ashamed again to admit it, but I practically bolted past a vacant old woman, back out through the front door and into the clean, fresh air and the safety of the vehicle. Roughly 15 minutes later, upon finishing the inspection alone, Jonathan joined me. His face was pale and drawn as he informed me that the kitchen and bathroom were brimming with empty pill packets. Then it seemed the woman had been so confused she had just been eating them like Skittles. Doped to the extent that she could no longer control neither her body nor her mind, she seemed to have been maintaining this pitiful excuse of existence for an extensive period. Months, years maybe, considering the sheer amount of prescription boxes he had found. My nausea stirred again. I hadn't even lasted a minute in that place. The thought of a life in those conditions was unimaginable. Jonathan paused for a moment, before adding quietly that there had also been fresh boxes of meds, along with some meagre ration-style supplies of dry food placed clearly on the kitchen counter, atop all the garbage and filth. Someone was visiting the occupant, whilst allowing her to live drugged, alone, and steeped in her own filth. This wasn't the worst case by far, but it was the first in which I felt like I'd peeled away a little bit of the lies that we tell ourselves about our communities. We assure ourselves as we drop our pennies into the charity box at the supermarket that we are good people. We wince and make Facebook statuses about our thoughts and prayers for whatever terror attack or natural disasters have devastated our precious news feeds that week. We share a video of a student buying his disabled classmate a pair of designer shoes, and we convince ourselves that there is good in this world. Jonathan called me later that week and said that after we filed the report, an official investigation was conducted, and it was discovered that the adult daughter of the woman had been providing her with just enough food to keep her alive, and just enough drugs to keep her subdued, whilst taking every single penny of government assistance for herself and her boyfriend. After I came home that first night, I locked myself in my room and stripped off my uniform. I stared in the mirror at my body and the saga of self-inflicted scars I had branded myself with since I was a young girl. My fingers traced the series of slashes across my thighs and across my wrists. And I thought about how many times I had considered opening my veins once and for all, out of my own self-hatred. How disgusted and furious I had been at my own worthlessness. As I gazed into my own face, I was not met with the familiar, dull sadness that I had become accustomed to. For the first time in years, my gut was not heavy with the cold weight of depression. It was hot, and the disgust I held didn't churn through my core, but rather poured from me, flooding my room and burning my skin. Why the fuck had I been directing my anger at myself all these years, when the real evil was walking among us? I pulled my clothing back on, I flushed my remaining razor blades, and I put myself to bed. For the first night in over a decade, I had a solid, sober night's sleep. My only thoughts were of the demons that thrived in our own sick society, and how they needed fighting just as much as those that whispered inside myself. As I said, this wasn't the worst case that I've seen, and I have more stories to tell about the shit that goes on in the neighbourhoods we live in, behind closed doors. But this was the one that stopped my anger blasting inwards all the time, I guess. Whether that be for better or worse. I'll post more if anyone is interested. Please, stay safe, stay sane, and please, check your fire alarms.